This poor high schooler is Trucken's latest victim, and when he wakes up, he finds himself in an East Kai world. But what he doesn't know is that he has a hidden trait that makes him immortal. The story begins in a medieval Isai world where a high schooler named Rio can be seen lying down inside an empty cottage. The cottage has no furniture inside except for only 2 books and a knife left on the table. Rio gets up, ignores these 3 items, and goes outside to get some fresh air. He looks around and sees nothing but tall mountains everywhere. He then looks at his hands and chants the spell water come forth, prompting a small body of water to appear magically and splash in his hand. It all begins a few days ago when Rio suddenly finds himself in a white empty void. As he starts to wonder where he is, the angel hosting this realm appears, and reading his thoughts assures him that this realm is not the afterlife. The angel expresses how glad he is to finally have a visitor after years, but at the same time shows grievance because Rio has just passed away in his home world after getting hit by Truckun. Rio is already aware of that, and he also figures that he's about to be reincarnated. So he asks the angel, naming him Angel Michael in his head, what he should do in his next life. Michael advises him to live however he wants to. Rio has always wanted to live a slow and boring life, and after getting Michael's approval, he gets ready to be reincarnated into the world full of magic known as Phi. Before letting him go, Michael tells Rio more about the world of Phi. According to Michael, only 20% of the world's population knows how to use magic, and in Rio's case, he can also use magic and is most compatible with the water element since he requested a slow, boring life. Michael transports him to the forest of Rondo to live alone in a small cottage. Michael has already arranged 2 months' worth of food in a small ice house. Inside the cottage, he has also left 2 books that can help Rio learn both about the world and how to use magic. And only after reading the book does Rio learn how to summon a small body of water out of nowhere. For now, he doesn't need to worry about being harmed by the forest monsters because Michael has created a barrier around the house. Rio once again practices using water magic and is able to create a water ball just by imagining it, discovering that he no longer needs to chant the spell out loud. Pretty convenient for the main character. Using his magic, Rio then fills the bathtub with fresh water, which I think is gross because the water is technically coming from his insides. The water in the bathtub is super cold, so he must now find a way to heat it up. He gets ready to light a fire using, of course, the most ancient, inefficient technique known to mankind. After failing to light a spark after several attempts, he gives up and wonders if there's a way to work around this with magic. Putting his previous life's chemistry lessons to good use, Rio separates hydrogen from oxygen, which causes the water to crystallize and turn into ice. Now that he has ice, he uses it as a medium to condense the sun's rays, using it like a magnifying glass and manages to unlock fire. With that fire, Rio finally unlocks hot water and takes a slow, long bath. His thoughts clear up, and with his mind refreshed, he realizes that he can just make hot water using magic by applying the same technique in reverse that he used to make ice. But that's for later. For now, he goes to eat dinner. While eating, he realizes he must start hunting soon as his food supply will run out. But he hesitates because if he goes out into the forest, he's surely going to encounter monsters, which he believes he cannot defeat with that small knife Michael left him. This means he will now have to unlock offensive magic as well. The next day, Rio works on his first attack spell, Water Ball, but it doesn't deal any damage to the target tree. So he modifies the spell, narrowing the ball into the size of an arrow. Only after hours of practice does he manage to unlock the most basic form of the Water Jet spell, which to be fair, still doesn't deal any damage to the target tree. The following day, he works on improving his ice magic since his water magic hasn't shown any signs of effectiveness in battle. He carefully creates an ice crystal, but fails to levitate it because projecting ice is not as easy as water. Still, after several hours of practice, Rio manages to summon several ice crystals at once, but still fails to launch them at the tree. After several days of trial and error, he becomes skilled enough to at least form ice crystals in an instant, but he still doesn't possess enough power to use them as projectiles. Regardless, because time is running out, Rio works around it, using the ice crystal as a spearhead and venturing into the forest. Near a riverbank, he finds some quartz and is glad because he can now use it to light a fire in case he depletes all his mana. He then goes to collect some medicinal herbs when a monster named Lesser Boar targets him as an easy kill. The boar charges straight at him, but out of fear, Rio fails to move his feet, which almost ends his EI journey right then and there. But at the very last second, the thought of dying again helps him jump away. This time, he uses magic to his advantage, making the ground slippery by turning it into ice, causing the boar to slip. He then quickly makes several icicles appear before the boar, and the boar ends up getting pierced to its demise. The adage, "Desperate times call for desperate measures," suits him so well because see him pull off water magic in the heat of the moment. Well, it was a great attempt, but he's still nowhere close to being good. He goes home and immediately learns about monsters in the monster compendium, and it doesn't take him long to realize that lesser boars are the weakest of all monsters. He takes his time to read through the book to learn about other creatures he might encounter, because maybe his slow life isn't actually slow. He reads the page that talks about dragons, and all the book can tell him is that when he sees a dragon, he should run. It's not like he can outrun it. He'll still die, but he should still make an attempt to run. He flips to the next page that talks about an Akuna. For this monster, he doesn't even have to run. He just has to pray he doesn't encounter it. The following day, he prepares himself and goes outside again. The day starts on a good note as he finds a tree with fruits. When he takes the first bite, it truly makes up for all the stress he went through the previous day. It tastes so good. Well, it brings him another stage of stress as an assassin hawk flies toward him and knocks him down. He sees that the hawk is stronger than he is, and there's no way he can conquer it. The hawk uses air magic that is invisible, so there's no way he can fight back. He remembers the idea from the book and runs, but how will he outrun a bird? Seeing he's trapped, he stops to fight. He uses his ice magic to trap the hawk. When he assumes the hawk is dead, he goes closer to it, but the hawk breaks through the ice, though one of its eyes is injured. When the hawk realizes he's stronger than before, it runs off. He sighs in relief and collapses to the ground, complaining that the slow life he asked for isn't actually slow. He tries to find his way back home, but realizes he's lost after running from the hawk. As he navigates the forest, he sees something that scares him, a dullahan. It has no head, and smoke pours from its neck. The dullahan is tending to its horse. One way or another, he finds his way back home. As time goes on, he trains to get better. From fighting several monsters to fishing, he upgrades his ice magic so much that his ice can now cut through a mountain. He keeps trying to get stronger, and at this point, he's getting a hang of his new life. However, every night, he returns to the place where he found the dullahan to fight it. Not because he wants to win, but maybe because it makes him stronger. He doesn't know much about dullahans because there's nothing about them in the monster compendium he's reading. So, it's either the dullahan isn't a monster or it's not in the beginner's book. After another failed fight, he admits that the only reason he keeps coming back is because he feels the dullahan wants to make him stronger. He watches as the dullahan makes an ice sword. The dullahan holds the sword toward him, and he takes the hint that it wants him to have it. After he accepts the sword, the creature leaves peacefully. The next few days, or maybe weeks, are calm for Rio. Well, until he encounters the revengeful hawk again. On that fateful day, he's training as usual when he sees the hawk in front of him. He notices it's missing an eye, so he immediately knows it's the same one he fought before. However, the hawk wasn't black before, but now it is. It also looks bigger, which means it has evolved. The hawk comes at him with so much strength that Rio evokes his 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk breaks through it without stress. He invokes the 10-layer wall, and the hawk breaks that too. When he uses his ice lancer, the hawk flies right through it to attack him. The stick he uses for support falls, and in the heat of the moment, he picks up the sword he got from the dullahan and attacks the hawk. The sword works. The hawk falls back, then comes at him again with full force, but he uses the sword to pierce it, and it falls. He walks up to the hawk, admitting that the creature is quite determined. Well, he had taken its eye again, and he knows the hawk wanted to fight back. However, for him, fighting the hawk has made him stronger, so he has the hawk to thank for that. He also admits that the hawk evolved just to fight him, so he gives it a moment of honor by letting it die by his hand. He removes his sword, and the hawk dies. Ryu then begins to head home, but then to his surprise, a dragon comes there. He figures that it is going to be his last day in this world, but surprisingly, the dragon starts talking to him through telepathy. The dragon asks him if he saw a black hawk, and Ryu panics, thinking that he might have killed the dragon's minion. Luckily, the dragon seems pretty chill about it and even compliments Ryu on his achievement. He then points that the weapon he is carrying is quite rare because it is the sword of the Fairy King. Ryu can't believe that, and he decides to learn more about the world from the friendly dragon who introduces himself as Luen. They talk all day, but in the evening, the dragon gets called home, and he tells Rio that they might meet again someday. On the other hand, the angel a few weeks later, Rio starts craving seafood, so he visits the beach, but he is shocked to find a shipwreck there. He quickly finds a man near the ship, and on checking him closely, Rio finds that he is not alive anymore. Suddenly, he hears a man groaning, and his eyes brighten because this is the first human he has met since coming to this world. The man named Abel has flashbacks of a giant octopus monster attacking his ship during a storm, which caused him to fall into the ocean. But when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in Rio's house. He realizes that he made it out safely somehow and immediately starts searching for others. As he leaves the house, he becomes even more confused because he has no idea where this place is. And just then, Rio approaches him from behind. Abel is shocked because despite being a fairly skilled warrior, he could not sense Rio coming. He is also shocked by his dressing sense, but decides to be polite and not talk about it at first. Abel introduces himself to Rio and thanks him for saving his life. Rio replies that he could only save him, and everyone else was already dead when he found them. Abel tells him not to worry about those guys because they were smugglers, but before he can elaborate, his stomach starts growling. Rio tells him that they can talk over a meal and leads him inside, where Abel the Nosy quickly brings up the topic of his clothes. Rio tells him that he has no other clothes and no fabric to create new ones, and Abel tells him to just buy some. He immediately stops thinking that Rio must be too poor to afford buying clothes. But Rio lessens his guilt by telling him that there are no people who live in this area besides him. Abel then asks Rio if he hunts for food, and he affirms. Next, he asks if he uses the knife for that, but Rio shows off his water magic, saying that he does most of his hunting using magic. Abel is impressed because only half the people in the world can use magic, and he is among the other half that can't. That is surprising news to Rio because the angel told him that only 20% of people can use magic. Anyway, Abel asks him to take him to the shore because he needs to confirm something. On the way, he tells Rio to let him take the front lines if they run into any sort of danger. Rio replies that it is not necessary, but Abel insists because he doesn't want to be the one being saved all the time. Rio lets him do as he pleases, and they soon reach the broken ship where all the bodies have vanished. Abel thinks that either the monsters or the sea took them, and he thanks Rio for rescuing him because otherwise he would have faced the same situation. Abel then says that he couldn't find what he was looking for, and for now he wants to meet up with his friends. But the storm sent the ship far south, and he has no idea which direction should he follow now. He suddenly gets an idea and asks Rio if he would like to come with him. Rio is shocked to hear this, and Abel says that he could use his help to find his way back, and then he could find him a job that will allow him to live in better conditions. Rio thinks about his offer for a while, and in the end he decides to become Abel's guide back to the city. That evening he looks at his garden that he has cultivated with a lot of effort, and he gets a bit sad thinking about leaving it all behind. At night he tells Abel that he is going out to say goodbye to someone, and even though the knight is curious about the person, he decides not to pry into the matter. Meanwhile, Rio heads to the lake to see the headless knight and inform him that he will be leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks the knight for teaching him how to fight, and then takes out his knife saying that he will fight extra hard tonight. The headless knight also draws his sword, and then Rio charges towards him, pushing him back with his relentless strikes. After a long and hard fight, Rio gets exhausted and the knight returns to the lake. Rio thanks him one more time, and the knight remains silent. However, as soon as he reaches his position, he turns around and summons a magic suit from inside the water as a farewell gift. Rio gets sentimental on receiving the suit, and he once again thanks the headless knight before returning home. The next morning, Rio and Abel get ready to depart on their journey, and Rio starts feeling nostalgic about leaving the place he has spent so much time in. Soon they run into a wild boar in the forest, and Abel asks him to let him handle it. He dashes towards the boar with his sword drawn, and then uses a combat skill to turn the poor animal into a donut. Rio is amazed and asks what are combat skills, and Abel explains that people who fight with weapons use combat skills. They camp in a hollow tree at night, and the next day they resume their journey through the forest. They come across some lizard men in a swamp, and Abel decides to change the route instead of crossing paths with them because they are quite strong. However, Rio can sense that the lizard men are following them even after they change their path, and Abel gets ready to fight them. Rio tells him that there are too many of them, and he will use his magic to fight too. Abel thinks that Rio won't be able to fight without his staff, but he is shocked when Rio blitzes for lizard men with his icicle lances. After the fight ends, Abel asks Rio about the spell he just used. He replies that it is just the regular icicle lance, but Abel tells him that his wind mage friends can only cast one attack at a time when they use magic, but he summoned 4 icicle lances at once. Rio tells him that it must be a problem of the wind magic, because this is pretty normal for water magic. Abel decides not to think about it that much, and says they should continue their journey. But before that, Rio creates 2 glasses using ice and summons water in them. Abel notices that he used a different incantation this time, and Rio covers it up by saying that he must have heard it wrong the last time. After that, Abel gives Rio a coin, and he excitedly says that this is the first time he is seeing money. Abel is dumbfounded because he always thought that Rio was poor, but he never imagined him to be this poor. He then starts telling Rio that there are three major countries in the Central Plains that include the Kingdom of Knightley, the Debuti Empire, and the Handela Federation. Rio starts throwing shade on the Debuti Empire because he doesn't like the name. And while he keeps talking about the stupid name, they reach a vast clearing. Suddenly, they notice a rock near them move on its own, and Abel quickly slashes it in half. Rio also puts up a water shield to block the stones speeding towards them, and Abel realizes that they just walked into a nest of rock golems. Rio asks if golems are not more humanoid in shape, but Abel decides to deal with them before answering the question. He dashes towards the nearest golem and blows a hole through it, but the golem quickly patches the wound and starts attacking him. Abel retreats, saying that their attacks won't be effective on the golems. But then Rio gets an idea. He creates a huge ice cube in the air and drops it on top of the golems, squishing them. Abel is aghast because he has never seen a spell like that before, but Rio uses it a few more times to defeat the rest of the golems. After that, they find a special rock golem with a big magic stone, and Abel says that it will sell for a lot. Rio says that he would like to get the magic stone out of other golems as well, but they are buried under ice, and he is either too lazy or too dumb to just melt all of it. They continue their journey with that, and soon come across a gigantic croc hippo. Abel says that it is a behemoth, which is a very rare and powerful monster he has never seen before. Rio asks if they should hunt it, but Abel tells him that it is not even possible. Just then, some wyverns also come there, and Rio gets excited because now they will see a battle between monsters. Soon, the wyverns begin shooting rocks at the behemoth with magic, but it just roars, canceling out their magic and causing them to fall to the ground. Rio tells Abel that the giant monster probably used magic cancellation skill. Later, as they are having dinner, Abel asks Rio more about the magic cancellation skill because he has only heard about certain traps in dungeons that can do that. Rio gets excited on hearing about dungeons, and Abel tells him that there is a dungeon in the city of Lawn where they are headed. Rio gets mad that he didn't tell him about this important thing earlier and asks him if he is hiding something else too. Abel asks him if he at least knows about dwarves and elves, but Rio asks him to give him the details. A few days later, they reach a mountain range, and Rio says that they will find some human settlement after crossing the mountains. Abel asks him how can he be so sure, and Rio wonders if he should tell him that he met a dragon who told him a lot about this world. He decides to keep it a secret in the end, saying that it is knowledge beyond human comprehension. Soon after that, they hear a strange sound, and both of them get ready to fight. However, when a powerful monster called Griffin approaches them from the sky, both Rio and Abel freak out. Abel starts having a panic attack, but Rio quickly solves the situation by throwing a chunk of meat up in the air. Abel apes his act, and the Griffin collects both pieces in its mouth before flying away. The boys heave a sigh of relief after it is gone, and they agree that they wouldn't have lasted long if they picked a fight with something so strong. As they continue their journey, Abel says that no human has encountered behemoths or griffins in the past 100 years, and the tall mountains must be stopping them from reaching human settlements. That reminds Rio that the wyverns who fought the behemoth came from the north, which means their nest is nearby. He turns out to be right, as they soon find some wyverns feeding on a monster. Rio wants to fight, but Abel says it takes at least 20 experienced adventurers to face off against monsters as strong as wyverns. Rio tells him that they won't be able to avoid fighting in the future and asks if it will be better if the wyverns are pinned to the ground. Abel affirms, saying that he can beat one in close combat, and Rio immediately steps out, chanting a long fake spell just to summon 4 icicles to stab the wings of the wyverns. Abel uses this chance to blow their brains out, but then 2 more wyverns arrive there. Rio pins them down using icicles, but without chanting a spell this time, and Abel gets suspicious. Anyway, they defeat the wyverns and collect their magic stones, and then continue their journey to the north. Soon they cross the mountain range and arrive at the Green Hills. Abel is surprised that they not only fought wyverns but managed to get a lot of magic stones that will fetch a lot of money once they reach the Empire. Rio suddenly gets curious about which country they are heading to because he is fine with anyone except the Debi Empire. Abel tells him that the Duhi Empire is a bit farther to the north, and Rio appears relieved on hearing that. This confuses Abel, and he asks Rio if he has got any issue with the Empire. He replies that he has no issue with the Empire or its people, but the name is so cringe that he doesn't want to associate with it, and Abel finds that quite odd. Suddenly, Rio spots a road in the distance, and on seeing that it runs from east to west, Abel realizes that the mountain range they just crossed was not ordinary. However, when Rio asks him what he is thinking about, he replies that it is nothing and says that the road will lead them to a town. Rio gets excited at the thought of sleeping in a bed, and Abel recommends him to try out the food in the town. They reach the town by night, and as they are eating dinner in an inn, Abel suggests Rio to get himself registered with the Adventurers' Guild because a guild license will work as his identity card. Also, if he has a guild license, he won't have to pay any tax when entering a new city. He reminds Rio that he just paid a silver coin to cover for him when they entered the town. And Rio begins taunting him, asking if he is going to keep the record of every penny he spends for a friend's sake. Abel is low-key cringed out at this behavior, but he continues his lecture and tells Rio that if he becomes a member of the Adventure Guild, the guild will buy magic stones and monster material from him at a good price. He explains that only alchemists can use those materials properly, and Rio gets curious to learn more about them. However, he doesn't get the chance to ask any questions as the waitress brings his food, and he can't believe his eyes when he sees a plate of curry rice. Rio tries to process how curry rice can exist in this world because even in the Ice Sky anime, the protagonist has to work hard and travel all over the world to create the perfect curry, and he was kind of looking forward to that. The taste of the curry is also as delicious and nostalgic as the one he used to eat in Japan, and Rio quickly finishes the plate before ordering more. The next day, Rio keeps rambling about how good the curry was and says that it turned out to be another interesting thing that Abel kept hidden from him. He playfully tells him to reveal all the secrets he is hiding, and Abel is taken back by that. But Rio just wanted him to tell him about the dessert shops in the town. Abel nervously walks away saying that he doesn't like sweets, and Rio is confused because of his sus behavior. Anyway, they resume their journey, and soon they reach the town of Lawn that is surrounded by vast wheat fields. As they reach the town gate, the guard Nimmer identifies Abel, and he is shocked to see him because he was reported missing a few months earlier. Abel tells him that a lot of things happened, and he managed to make it back home thanks to Rio. Nimmer thanks Rio for saving his friend and then eagerly shakes his hands, after which he starts catching up with Abel. Once they are inside the town, Abel tells Rio that they should head straight to the guild because with him there, Rio can rank up immediately at the time of registration. He explains that usually newbie adventurers are assigned F rank when they register, but if an adventurer ranked B or above can put a good word for them, they can rise up to D rank immediately. They soon reach the guild, and everyone there is pleasantly surprised to see Abel again. They surround him like he is some kind of celebrity, and Rio is happy that Abel has so many people who care about him. He decides to let him enjoy this reunion for a bit more and steps outside to get some fresh air. He starts taking a walk when suddenly he runs into an elf. While Rio is captivated by her pointy ears and pretty face, the elf girl can't take her eyes off of him as well because of his outfit. She recognizes that it is the Fairy King's coat and says that he must like Rio a lot to give him such a gift. Rio can't even understand what she means. And then the elf girl tells him that she is in a hurry today, but she hopes to meet him again someday. Rio just stands there bamboozled when Abel comes outside to find him and tells him to come back in. He then introduces Rio to all his friends as the guy who saved his life. Everyone thanks Rio for saving Abel, and he starts liking all the attention he is getting. After that, Abel takes Rio to the front desk and asks the receptionist to register him as a D-rank adventurer on his recommendation. The receptionist is shocked to hear this, because no one from Abel's party has ever recommended anyone before, and he replies that Rio is a very special case. The receptionist says that Rio will still need to show proof of his strength before getting a rank up, and Abel says that he wants to talk to the guild master about that directly. The receptionist tells him and Abel to wait for a while, and soon the dramatic guild master Hugh comes running as he hears that Abel has returned. Abel then introduces him to Rio and says that he wants him to take the rank up exam. Hugh replies that they will need to test his strength for that, and Abel replies that Rio is stronger than him, which the guild master finds really hard to believe. To prove his point, Abel shows Hugh all the magic stones they collected from the wyverns, and he loses his mind. He says that the amount of magic stones they have means they have hunted enough wyverns that could destroy an entire country. And Abel tells him that he doesn't need to worry about a monster attack because they hunted the wyverns south of the Malefic Mountains. Rio is curious if the name of the mountain is significant somehow, and Hugh says that he hasn't heard of any person who has crossed the Malefic Mountains safely. He claims that they are so dangerous that even the highest-ranking adventurers don't go there without a very compelling reason. He can't believe that Rio and Hugh are the first people in history to achieve this feat, and he immediately agrees to increase Rio's rank without taking a test. Just then, Abel's party barges into the room, and they are really emotional because they thought they would never see him again. The guild master decides to let them catch up with their friend while he takes Rio outside to register. Rio follows him, but Abel asks him to wait at the receptionist's desk after he is done because he wants to show him to a special place. After that, Hugh leads Rio to his office while telling him that Abel's party, the Crimson Sword, is one of their strongest and most popular parties. Rio is not really surprised by that, and he is more curious if he really deserves to be a D rank right from the start. In response, Hugh tells him that he knows how talented Abel is, but he knows that he can't defeat a wyvern on his own. That makes him believe that Rio played an important role in fighting the wyverns, which qualifies him to be a D rank. Just then, the receptionist comes to the office with the equipment needed to formally register Rio as an adventurer, and Hugh leaves it to her because he has too much paperwork to handle. The reception, Nina, starts by introducing herself and then begins asking the basic interview questions. She then tells Rio that for 300 days after his registration at the guild, he can stay at the guild lodgings, but then he will have to find another place to stay. Next, she tells him about the course on dungeon exploration that the guild offers new adventurers like him, and Rio immediately replies that he wants to enroll in the course. Na tells him to come to the meeting hall 2 days later at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Rio is shocked to learn that they have clocks here. Na then moves on to the actual registration process and tells Rio to put his hand on the crystal device in front of him. As he places his hand on the crystal, it scans his biometrics and uploads the data on the metal plate kept on top, turning it into his guild card. Mina congratulates Rio for officially being registered at the guild, and with that, they leave the office. Soon after that, Abel takes Rio on a tour of the town, saying that he wants to buy him some clothes and a staff as the payment for escorting him here. Rio is glad to receive the clothes, but he is curious about the staff. Abel says that all magicians need a staff, but Rio replies that he can use magic just fine without any tools. He adds that he also uses a sword when he has to fight melee, so a staff wouldn't really help him out much. Abel is surprised to hear this, and he is even more surprised when Rio tells him that the small knife he has is actually his sword. Anyway, Rio tells him that he needs something more urgently than clothes or staff, and that is information about the basics of this world. Soon after that, he learns that the hour, day, week, and month in this world are the same as that on Earth, and they even use the metric system to measure stuff. Now he is sure that someone from Earth came to this world a long time ago and changed how things are done, which is why there are so many familiar things here. Just then, Abel returns from the store after paying for the things Rio bought, and then he tells him that the main event of the day is still left. He takes Rio to a huge inn where all his friends from the guild are present to celebrate his safe return. They party all night, and the next morning, Nina has to bail Rio out to show him the place where he will be staying. She takes him to a room where 2 newbie adventurers are already staying, and the brown-haired guy introduces himself as Niels and the blonde dude as Ito. They welcome him to their room, and once Na leaves, Niels starts talking about how much he likes her. Ito tells him to stop dreaming of women outside his league, and then he starts making small talk with Rio about how things are at the guild lodging. Suddenly, Na returns to the room with another newly registered adventurer who nervously introduces himself as Ammon, and the 4 boys soon start to bond with each other. A few days after that, Rio and Ammon complete their crash course on dungeon exploration for dummies, and their teacher tells them that they are going to enter the first level of a dungeon in the afternoon. Ammon is visibly tense about going into a dungeon, but Rio tells him to chill out because if he gets worked up now, he will be tired by the time they reach the dungeon. The instructor then asks if anyone has any questions, and Rio asks him if there is a way to instantly travel to the floors they have cleared before. The instructor is impressed by the question because only experienced adventurers know about that. He says that there are some dungeons in the south that have the feature to instantly travel between checkpoints, but there is nothing like that in Lon's dungeon. After that, the instructor leads all the students to the dungeon that is in the middle of the city. He explains that the city was actually built around the dungeon, and every few years, the monster population in the dungeon suddenly increases, and sometimes the monsters reach the surface. He explains that the walls around the dungeon protect the civilians from the monsters, but then assures the newbies that there is no chance of a great monster wave right now. Soon they reach the first floor of the dungeon, which is a safe zone without monsters. The instructor tells everyone that they are free to explore the first floor, but they need to stay close to the entrance. Rio and Ammon team up, and soon Rio senses a monster approaching them. He tells Ammon to strike the monster while he holds it in place, and the boy nervously draws his sword. A few moments later, a monster ant arrives there, and Rio immediately identifies it as a soldier ant from the book he read. He tells Ammon to strike the neck of the monster while he stops it using icicle lances. Rio completely pins the monster to the ground, and Ammon easily cuts off its neck, scoring his first kill. He is overjoyed at this, and Rio extracts the ant's magic stone as a trophy for their first successful monster hunt. Later, they have dinner with their roommates who want to celebrate their first dungeon trip, and they are quite impressed that they managed to take down a soldier ant. Ammon says that he only dealt the finishing blow and Rio did most of the work by holding the ant down. He then says that he wants to go to the dungeon again tomorrow, but he is worried about going alone. Rio offers to tag along because he also wants to explore the dungeon a bit more because he is concerned about finding a monster on the first floor even when the instructor said that there were no monsters there. Ito adds that he has also heard about soldier ants coming to the second and first floor lately, and the boys are confused about the reason. Just then, Abel arrives there and says it is because soldier ants can dig their way up, and the boys freak out on seeing the most famous adventurer in the town up close. Rio, however, is frank as usual with his friend, and then Abel asks the boys to take care of him because he lacks common sense. Mills suddenly stands up in attention and introduces himself to Abel, saying that he is his idol and he wants to become a famous adventurer like him someday. He requests to shake his hand, and Abel obliges, telling him to work hard but make sure that survival is his first priority. Just then his party arrives there, and the girls are mad that he came here instead of reporting to the guild master Aster. He tells them that he was just guiding some beginners who needed help, but the lowly Lynn tells Shaq's lost son Warren to take him away. The big guy carries Abel on his back as he screams like a baby. And then Lynn starts staring at Rio with jealous eyes. He gets a bit nervous and asks what she wants. But then the priestess Leia tells her to snap out of it before apologizing to Rio for the disturbance. As they go away, Ito and Mills start fanboying after them. But Rio doesn't understand what they find impressive about that group of buffoons. Meanwhile, Ria tells Lynn that it was not nice of her to stare at Rio, but she replies that she was just curious because Abel keeps on glazing his magic skills. Ria admits that she is curious too, but Abel tells them they will soon see Rio's true skills. The next day, Rio and Ammon go to the dungeon again, and this time they face some monster dogs while Rio holds the dogs down using icicle lances. Ammon proves to be a decent swordsman as well and takes down a couple of them. As they take a break after that, Rio remarks that Ammon's sword fighting style reminds him of Abel, and he explains that his teacher was an old dude named Kira who learned sword fighting from a big school in the capital. Rio assumes that Abel must have learned from the same school, and he sees potential in Eamon to become quite strong as well. Ammon is impressed by his knowledge of sword play, even though he is just a mage, and Rio tells him that he practiced with a mentor, but he developed his own sword style. He then remarks that Ammon's style seems to be very exhausting, but it is also very safe, and he just needs to work on his stamina. He tells Ammon that Abel used to practice his form the first thing in the morning during their travels, and that just shows that even the most talented people need to work hard. Ammon feels motivated on hearing that, and decides to work hard to become stronger, and Rio is pleased by his response. The next day, Rio visits the library, and it is much bigger than his expectations. That's what she said. Anyway, he asks the librarian to show him to the alchemy section, and she shows him where books for beginners are kept. However, there are too many options that overwhelm Rio, so he decides to take a break outside. Suddenly, the city turns dark as a total solar eclipse occurs, and Rio stares at it without eye protection like my uncle, who is now blind. Just 1 second later, he realizes something is odd, and all the people around him have vanished. The atmosphere itself feels different, and then suddenly he feels an attack coming from behind. He is fast enough to react in time, blocking the powerful fire blast using a wall of ice. He wonders who the hell attacked him, and then sees a badass demon mommy coming towards him, walking like she just came out of GTA 4. She is quite amused to see a human in her space, and decides to have fun defeating him. Rio realizes that he is facing a demon now, and he is quite sure that she is the strongest being he has ever seen in this world. He wants to run away from her, but he feels that he won't be able to escape this strange space, no matter what he tries. So he decides to fight back. He immediately summons dozens of ice shields right before the demon mommy attacks, blocking her massive firestorm. She abruptly changes her attack, shooting an invisible wind bullet that pierces Rio's shields, but it gets blocked by his armor. The demon can't can't process how a human armor can block against her attack. But as she looks closely, she finds that Rio is wearing the Fairy King's robe. She realizes that he must be an impressive mage to have such gear and power to block her attacks. So, she decides to cut him down using her sword instead of magic. Rio also draws his ice sword and blocks her attack. He maintains a defensive position as the demon lady keeps pushing him back, but she is much faster than him, and he barely dodges a deadly strike to his face. He decides to counterattack by shooting hundreds of icicle lances at her, but the demon swiftly dodges all of them, not noticing that the solar eclipse is ending as she wastes her time playing around. Meanwhile, Rio realizes that she is using wind magic to boost her speed, and then she jumps at him to deal the finishing blow. Rio manages to block it without much difficulty, because even though the demon is fast, her strikes are nothing compared to the headless knight who taught him. The demon, on the other hand, is impressed and asks who the hell is he to have the Fairy King's robe as well as his sword. She creates a fireball to attack him, but Rio cancels it instantly using an icicle lance. This pisses the demon off, and she decides to kill him quickly because he can be a danger to her if the fight goes on for longer. She attacks him ruthlessly, but Rio confidently defends against her strikes. He finds a chance to counterattack, and that makes the demon lose her balance. Rio was waiting for this moment, and he launches a barrage of icicle lances at her. The demon creates a wall of fire around her, neutralizing all his attacks. But as their intensity increases, she creates rock walls to protect herself. Rio also changes his attack pattern, using the high-pressure water jets to cut through the wall and injure the demon. She is shocked when his attacks hurt him, but luckily for her, Rio was just attacking blindly because of all the smoke. He then decides to go in for the kill, but she jumps straight towards him to block his attack. As they clash midair, Rio notices the demon woman's wounds healing super fast. The moment he gets distracted by that, she sends his crashing into a building. But just as she is about to launch a powerful attack to finish him off, she notices water drops falling from the sky. She is surprised by that, but as a water drop touches her face and scalds her because it was even hotter than the boiling temperature, she screams in pain. She immediately covers herself in a rock ball while waiting for the boiling rain to end. And in the meantime, Rio comes down. Suddenly, the demon woman unleashes powerful flame magic, blowing up everything around her. She walks towards Rio menacingly, but by then, the eclipse is almost over. The demonist says that they won't be able to finish their fight this time, and Rio tells her to get lost already. She doesn't really mind him acting like a jerk and introduces herself as Leonor, asking Rio about his name. He tells her his name, too, even though he makes it clear that he doesn't want to know anything more about a demon. Leonor is surprised that Rio knows about demons, and she thinks that she should have done all she could to kill him instead of enjoying their fight. She then tells Rio that they will fight again in the future, but it is possible that he runs into another demon before that. She tells him not to get killed by anyone else because she will be much stronger the next time and finish him off herself. Rio is shocked to hear that, but then the eclipse ends and everything returns to normal without a trace of the battle that just took place there. Rio feels really odd now, and he decides to buy some books and then get some rest. He first heads to the bank to withdraw some money that he got from selling the Wyvern magic stones, and then passes by his dorm room to meet his friends. He notices they are not there, but as he is about to leave the dorm, he finds them being bullied by some other adventurers. Mills and Ito call him a coward for ambushing them when they were injured, but the leader of the bullies, Dan, tells them that they can say the same thing when monsters ambush them in the dungeon and they die. Suddenly, his lackey are knocked out cold because Rio attacked them from behind, and he tells Dan that he was absolutely right, but he should hear his own advice sometimes. He asks him if he is ready to run now that his friends are down, and Dan immediately rushes to punch him. Rios simply steps aside and hits him in the gut with his sword's handle, causing him to throw up this morning's breakfast. He then moves on to heal his friends, telling them that they need more stamina so that no punk ass can catch them off guard the next time. However, before that, he says they should all recover and relax. They hit the public bath where the priest heals Rio's wound from the wind bullet. Everyone is curious about who could injure Rio when he is so strong, and he decides not to tell them about the demon right now because relaxing comes first. Soon after that, Ammon, Mills, and Ito start going to the dungeon as a team. While Neil, Mills, and Ammon fight goblins, Ito stays in the back to assist them and heal them when they get injured. Mills starts collecting the magic stones from goblins while Ito heals Ammon, and they talk about how dangerous it was for them to run into some goblins. Mills says that they should retreat now because going any further will be dangerous. And Ito agrees with him because they shouldn't have found goblin archers on the 4th floor of the dungeon. Ammon, on the other hand, wants to hunt some more monsters and earn some money. But Niels remembers what Abel told them about never risking their life for less important things. In the end, they head back to the surface, which is the greatest save of the day. Because just a few floors below, a group of adventurers has met its end at the hands of a huge and powerful monster. Back on the surface, Rio thinks about how Leonore's magic was out of this world, but he was on equal footing with her in terms of casting speed. He decides to improve on his strengths and erase his weaknesses, which reminds him that he couldn't keep up with Leonore's movement speed yesterday. He gets jealous of her wind magic, but since he can't do that, he decides not to be jealous and come up with his own solutions instead. He thinks that he should use a water jet to propel himself ahead. And though he has already done it underwater before, he doesn't know if it will work on the surface. He first creates an icy platform in front of himself and then uses hundreds of small water jets pushing all the points of his back to propel him forward. However, he only goes as fast as an old grandma at a traffic crossing. Rio is really dissatisfied with those results, but he decides to call it work in progress, which is what I call my mental health. He then heads to the library to learn more about demons and alchemy. And at the same time, the lowly wizard Lynn from Abel's party is also studying in the library. She is trying to find any records of a spell that can create an ice wall thick enough to crush golems. But she can't find anything. She is pleased because she wants to believe that Rio is just a scammer who fooled Abel and thinks that only the strongest wizard on the continent can use such strong magic spells. Just as she puts the book back on the shelf, she sees the elf girl, Sarah. The two girls exchange greetings and make small talk before Sir remembers that she has to get back to her group. On the other hand, Ammon and others return to the guild and Niels starts stuttering like AS on seeing the receptionist Nina. Ito bonks him on the head as he tells Na that they found goblin archers on the 5th floor, which is unheard of, and that is why they returned quickly to report to her. Na confirms the magic stones and rushes to inform the guild master about the incident, thanking the boys for this crucial information. Hugh is not pleased to hear that goblins were found on the 5th floor when they are monsters that belong below the 10th floor of the dungeon. He thinks that this might be the sign of a bigger problem and asks Nina to summon all the B rank and above parties immediately. Nina tells him that there are only 2 high-ranked parties in the city right now, including Abel's Crimson Sword and the White Brigade. Soon, Abel and his party head to Hugh's office, and he is not happy that he will need to work with the White Brigade on this mission because he doesn't like their leader. The girls tell him to stop being such a wimp, and he somehow calms down before entering the office. Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, is already there, and Abel struggles not to make a face on seeing him. Once both of them sit down, Hugh explains that goblins were found on the 5th floor of the dungeon, and the information is fully reliable. He says that both Crimson Sword and White Brigade need to enter the dungeon and investigate it for any signs of a monster outbreak. He says that the last outbreak happened 10 years ago, and even though it is quite early, there are chances that another outbreak is on the way. He offers them an advanced payment of 100 gold coins and another 200 gold coins when the mission is complete. But then Abel asks him if they are only supposed to investigate the matter. Hugh affirms, and then Phelps asks what are they supposed to do if the monster outbreak has started. The guild master replies that they should come back to the surface immediately because they will lock down the walls around the dungeon and take help from the knights to deal with the monsters. He tells them that he has already informed the Lord and the Knights headquarters about this because if it is really a monster outbreak, they need to be fully prepared for it. He then asks both the parties if they are willing to accept this mission, and they immediately agree to it. The next day, Rio gets ready to visit the Northern Library by the time his roommates wake up. He tells them that he was planning to study more about alchemy and heard that the Northern Library had books on more advanced topics. Ito tells him that he has heard right and dank and above adventurers can access the Northern Library. Ammon adds that he has heard rumors about forbidden books being stored in the Northern Library as well. Rio is really excited on hearing this, but Ito tells him that he needs to be at least a B-rank adventurer to read those books. The boys wish him all the best on his quest for knowledge as they decide to get ready for another round of dungeon raid. Rio soon reaches the Northern Library and immediately likes the vibe of the place. He begins looking around to find the books he needs and thinks that if he asks someone to show him the books about demons, they will surely freak out. However, just as he climbs the stairs to the first floor, and he is immediately smitten by her. On the other hand, Hugh and the two high-ranked parties have reached the gates of the dungeon. Just as they are about to open the door, Abel stops Hugh because his instincts tell him that something is wrong. He asks Lynn to use her wind magic to scan the first floor for any monsters, and she immediately finds hundreds of monsters waiting for them right in front of the gate. Everyone panics on hearing this because this is enough proof that the great monster outbreak has already begun. Hugh orders everyone to fall back and contact the knights and the guild. In the guild, Mills and others see the notice that the dungeon has been closed. Just then, a man comes running there to announce that a monster outbreak has started and all the adventurers are to get on the walls surrounding the dungeon to stop the monsters. On the other side, Rio and Sarah have been staring at each other while all this happened. And then she finally says that they meet again. They introduce themselves, and then Sarah asks if he is looking for anything special. Rio almost blurts out that he is looking into demons, but covers it up and says that he wants to learn alchemy to create golems. Sarah is impressed by his ambition because creating golems is not easy, but she tells him that there are no books that deal particularly with that. However, she asks him to follow her because she can tell him which books will help him the most as she knows almost everything about this library. They start talking about books and adventuring on the way, and Sierra reveals that she is the sole member of a B-rank adventurer party called Wind. Rio remarks that a friend told him that there was only one elf in the city, and Sarah tells him that elves don't mingle with humans, but she is an oddball. On the other hand, all adventurers in the city have reached the dungeon walls, and soon the monsters break through the heavy gate. Hugh commands everyone to attack them using magic and arrows, starting a fierce battle against the goblin army. The knights also join them soon, and the situation looks under control, but Hugh is worried because there are more monsters than he saw in the last outbreak. In the meantime, Abel's party runs out of arrows. But just then, Niels brings a barrel full of arrows to him along with a message from Hugh that his party is supposed to take down the boss monster. After the wave of mobs ends, soon almost all the goblins are down, and Hugh commands Abel and Phelps to lead their parties into the battle. They jump down from the wall, and Lim uses wind magic to slow down their landing. They rush ahead, dealing with the remaining goblins quickly before reaching the door and waiting for the boss. Soon a goblin general comes out of it, and they think that it will all end once they kill him. However, two more goblin generals come out after him, and Abel realizes that they are dealing with a goblin king here. He says that they need to deal with the goblin generals before the goblin king arrives, because they will become too strong otherwise. He decided that he and Phelps will take down one king each, while Lynn and Leah will take the remaining one. They begin fighting the generals, and Abel manages to cut off his enemy's arms, when suddenly he spots the goblin king at the entrance and yells at everyone to get down. The very next moment, a powerful wind slash comes out from the dungeon, killing the goblin generals in one hit. Everyone is shocked by the Goblin King's strength and ruthlessness, but Abel and Phelps know that they are the only ones who can fight it. They team up to attack the Goblin King together, but their weapons fail to pierce his armor. Suddenly, Abel dashes straight at the Goblin King, using his skill to turn into a ghost so that he can dodge his attack. He then reaches closer to him and uses his combat skill to pierce his heart, but fails to finish the job. The Goblin King tries to attack him, but Abel commands Lynn to finish him off as he vanishes again. Lynn's wind spears pass through him and hit the Goblin King, taking him down. Everyone is relieved on seeing that they finally won, but they do not know that things are far from over as something even more dangerous is still inside the dungeon. Later that day, as Rio returns to the guild, he finds everyone abnormally hyped up while Hugh is buried under a mountain of paperwork. He is sulking in his office because he has to update the local lord and the knight commander about the monster outbreak, and then pay the fee to all the adventurers who took part in the battle. He also has to assess the performance of all the adventurers, send the invoices to the royal capital to get some funds, and plan the repair of the damaged facilities while doing his normal job as well. The only relief is that the dungeon is going to be closed off for 1 month, so he doesn't have to worry about that aspect. But Hugh knows that will create another set of problems. Meanwhile, Rio learns from his friends that there was a monster outbreak in the dungeon, and they dealt with it thanks to the top two parties. That is the reason for the festive atmosphere, and Rio thinks that it is a good reason. Mills begins glazing Abel's skills and talks about how he fought with the Goblin King. Ito adds that Lin dealt the finishing blow with Bullet Rain, which is the highest level wind magic. Ammon says that Abel was able to dodge that attack even without moving, and he wonders how could he do that. Just then, Abel arrives there and says that he used the sword skill called Perfect Shadow that allows him to dodge all ranged attacks. Mills and others start fanboying as they see Abel, and he also praises them for their help. Meanwhile, Rio keeps thinking about the Perfect Shadow skill and says that whoever named it must have been a genius. Just then, Lin and Leia arrive there looking for Abel, and they say that they knew he would be with Rio. Rio feels a lot of hostility behind their sweet-sounding words, but then suddenly Lin asks him if he can really create a wall of ice. He affirms, saying that his limit is a cube with a 40 edge, and Lin can't believe her ears. Rio tells her that it was not easy to learn and master, but he managed to do it somehow. She asks him if it is an original spell, but he doesn't even know what that means. Lin says that it is basic knowledge that most spells are cast by reciting incantations, but Rio says that he believes that incantations are a personal preference. Lin doesn't even get what he is saying. But before she can ask another question, Niels tells Rio that the food is getting cold, and he rushes to the food counter immediately. Lin is confused, and Abel tells her that Rio thinks that incantations are just used because they sound cool, and he can use magic without them, and that is the most bizarre thing Lin has ever heard. Soon after that, jobs become scarce at the guild. Niels and his friend just watch the empty notice board because the jobs were already taken when they came in. Just then, Rio also arrives there, and he learns about how the job market has been struggling ever since the dungeon got shut temporarily. The boys ask him if he is here for a quest, too, and Rio replies that he needs to buy some magic copper ore for his alchemy experiments. They are shocked to hear this because magic ore is really costly, but they know that Rio is filthy rich, so it doesn't matter to him. On the other hand, they are struggling to get a job. Rio decides to help his bros out, and he says that he will hire them for a job to mine magic copper ore. Mills tells him that there is an abandoned mine near the city, and Rio is glad to learn that. He tells the boys that he will pay them 4 gold coins each just for taking up the job, and then he will buy each piece of copper ore for 25 gold coins. But his only condition is that they should all return home safe. The boys are thrilled to hear that because they won't make that much money in a year through normal jobs. They ask him if he is sure he can pay this much, and Rio replies that it is still cheaper than the market rate of the magic copper ore. They gladly leave for the job, and Rio returns to his room. But then he hears some disturbing voices coming from the street. He finds a group of knights trying to take a woman with them, and an adventurer is trying to stop them. Rio watches the drama intensify as the knights drag the girl away, and the adventurer pushes them to free her. This pisses one knight, and he draws his sword to teach the adventurer a lesson. However, just as he is about to strike him, he slips and falls, but there is nothing there to make him slip. He asks the adventurer what he did, and he replies that it must have been John Cena who tripped him. Just then, Phelps comes there and tells the knights to back away if they don't want to be punished. They ask him how dare a mere adventurer talk to them in this tone, and Phelps tells them that he is not just an adventurer, but also a noble from the Heinlein family. One of the knights realizes that it is the same family from which the previous commander of the Royal Knights came, and Phelps declares that they are talking about his dad. He then tells them to stop shaming the reputation of knights, and they immediately run away. Phelps then commends the adventurer on his bravery and asks him to escort the woman to her friends. Once they leave, he turns towards Rio's window, who greets him. Phelps introduces himself as the leader of the White Brigade Party and says that he has heard all about his amazing magic. Rio panics, thinking that Phelps noticed him using magic to make the knight slip, but he says that he is only talking about what Abel told him. Just as they are starting to talk, Phelps' secretary comes there to take him away, and Rio can tell that both of them are really strong. Later, he has dinner by himself, and Abel comes there to sit with him. He remarks that it is rare to see Rio alone these days, and he says the same thing about him. He decides to let Rio in on a secret because he could use his help, and soon they find themselves in the entertainment district. There, Abel reveals that the captain of knights is his friend, and he has requested him to bring back the troublesome knights who have run away to have fun. Rio understands it now, but then suddenly he notices some shady masked adventurers. He brings Abel's attention towards them and says that he has never seen them before, not even at the welcome party. Abel says that they get a lot of traveling adventurers because of the dungeon, but Rio remarks that the dungeon is closed right now. The adventurers notice them as well, and they immediately try to lure them into a trap. Rio and Abel willingly follow them, but when the thugs try to ambush them, Rio knocks them out with heavy ice stones immediately. Abel then picks up an alchemy tool that they dropped, and Rio wants it, but he tells him that it is evident. He then ties up the thugs and finds that they are C-ranked adventurers from another country. Abel decides to inform the city guards about them and resume his mission to find the troublemaking knights, unaware that they are targeting Phelps to get revenge for earlier. However, they can't even move once they decide to attack him because the secretary has already paralyzed them with poison needles. She then casts a fire spell, burning the knights so thoroughly that not even their ashes remain. The next day, a research team arrives from the capital to study the dungeon after the monster outbreak, and Hugh immediately gets in a verbal spat with their leader, Clive, because of his unreasonable demands. He wants the city of Lawn to provide food and supplies to his entire group when they are facing an acute shortage, and he also wants to open up the dungeon to research it. Hugh tells him that it is stupid to open the dungeon so soon after an outbreak, but Clive tells him that he has got full authority from the newly appointed Minister of Dungeon Exploration. The two of them get in a deadlock, and the debate doesn't seem to end. So, the wise old mage decides to intervene. He first tells Hugh that they will handle the food issue next time, and this time, the city can accommodate them. As for opening the dungeon, Clive says that Hugh has no choice, but he decides to put one condition of his own. He says that if the city or its citizens are harmed by opening the dungeon, it will be the responsibility of the ministry. But Hugh makes it clear that he won't open the dungeon gate until he agrees with it. The old mage convinces Clive to accept the condition and then says that they will hire some skilled adventurers as their guards for this mission. On the other hand, Rio visits the inn where Abel and his party stay to see if they serve better food than the guild lodgings. However, just as he is about to enter, a girl runs out of the door and asks him to take her to the Adventurer Guild because she has an urgent message to deliver. Rio is quite hungry, but he decides to help the girl who delivers the letter to Abel. His teacher from the royal capital has sent it, asking him to help the research party that is being sent to explore the dungeon. Abel is not sure about that because many years ago, a powerful or rank party went into a dungeon shortly after an outbreak, and they never returned. Rio tells him that he should decline the request in that case, and he decides to go back to the inn to have lunch. Meanwhile, the girl introduces herself as Natalie, a novice mage from a family of reputed water magic users. Lynn immediately asks her if she has heard of a spell to cast ice wall high up in the air, and she replies that she is not, but she is only starting to learn magic. Natalie asks them if there is someone who can cast such spells, and they tell him that the guy who brought her here can do that. She is surprised to hear that, and Abel once again starts glazing Rio. He then orders his party members that they should never fight Rio under any condition because they won't be able to defeat him together. He also tells Natalie that if she needs help and she can't find them, she should immediately go to Rio. The next day, the research team gets ready to enter the dungeon, and in the end, old mage from the past, and they talk about the mana detector tool that can transmit signals of mana from the dungeon to the analysis team that has set camp outside. 3 days pass after this, and the research team reaches the 7th floor of the dungeon, but they don't find anything unusual at all. However, Clive and his team from the Royal Academy seem to be in a hurry to find something, and Abel decides not to bother with pompous pricks like them. At the same time, outside, the lower-ranked adventurers receive updates about things going on in the dungeon and the jobs they can take. While it is still off-limits to them, Rio has a question in his mind, and he asks Hugh about the color of the magic stones that the monsters from the outbreak dropped. Hugh tells him that it is an excellent question because all the goblins dropped yellow magic stones when they are supposed to be green instead. Meanwhile, Clive and his team suddenly come across a suspicious gate in the dungeon that gives strange energy reading. They think that it must be a portal leading to a faraway place, so they set up their equipment around it. However, just as they try to touch the gate, everyone suddenly vanishes, and Natalie, who is taking the readings, is shocked because the readings also stop coming as soon as everyone vanishes. Luckily, everyone has been teleported to the same location, and Abel confirms the safety of his team before uniting with the senior mage. Clive, on the other hand, orders his men to begin examining the strange grassland they have reached, but he tells them to be careful because they don't know what kind of dangers are lurking here. His right-hand man comes there just then, asking what they should do now. Clive has no idea, but at least his theory that the monsters came from the 38th floor of the dungeon has been proven wrong. He now realizes that the monsters came from this strange place that was beyond the gate. He thinks that this is a great discovery, and with this he will be able to rise to the position of a minister in no time. As he is grinning to himself, the other researcher points out some figures on the horizon, and they look like some creepy Pokemons. On the other hand, Natalie and the data collection team are worried about the lost signal. Suddenly, the signal returns and tells them that the exploration team is on the 40th floor, but it vanishes immediately again. Just then, a guy named Christopher arrives there, and he introduces himself as the representative of the Magic College. He asks the researchers from the academy what they found and asks them to share whatever they can.